Syracuse kept JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman. Plus, they added Naithan George in the transfer portal. So, how much better is Syracuse now compared to last season?
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in a Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Of course, we're always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are joined by Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House, and we're going to break down some of the aspects of Syracuse basketball's State of the Union address. It was a 48-minute length interview. Adrian Autry and Alex Klein giving their thoughts on Syracuse's offseason. So, Neil, we're going to start off talking to the podcast about keeping JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman. We'll get to the transfer portal additions that Syracuse has made, specifically talking about Naithan George and how much better he makes Syracuse basketball. And then at the end of the podcast, we will go over the freshman class. Now, before we get into everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, Neil, Adrian Autry and Alex Klein, they mentioned in the State of the Union address last week that there are no rankings for grading returning production here. And those two main returners for Syracuse basketball are, of course, JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman. And hey, they mentioned in that interview that basically any school in the country would covet players like those two. So how important was it for Syracuse this offseason to keep JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman in the picture?
Well, Jackson, as always, thanks for having me on, brother. From the roster from this past year, obviously, not factoring guys who have exhausted their eligibility, or although some of the guys who I thought had are in the transfer portal, but that's a whole nother topic of conversation. But the guys that have eligibility left, those are the two main guys that Syracuse needed to keep from my perspective. JJ Starling, he missed a handful of games, and obviously Donnie only played in 14, but Donnie averaged 13 and 7. And in the state of the program, and of course I'm having like a senior moment now, but they listed like the only freshmen at Syracuse who have ever averaged at least 13 and 7 or something like that. And it was like Donnie, Mello, O'Shea Brissett, and maybe Dante Green. It was a short list.
It was like 4 or 5 players.
Yeah, I might be missing one, or if I goofed one, my bad. But the point is that even though he only played in 14 games, he clearly has potential, as a scorer, a rebounder. Certainly him and everyone else on the team was not very good on defense, but that's again, not necessarily just picking on him. The whole team stunk on defense, but and he can shoot the three, and he's athletic, and him coming back. It's funny, and I think you and I have talked about it in the past, but so many people after he got injured, and then it was like, is he coming back this season? Like, it was I don't think this SU Athletics, like in the program itself, like was super transparent about Donnie, but so many people on social media, oh, he's hitting the portal if he doesn't go to the NBA, and I don't think he was going to be an NBA prospect after only playing 14 games. But I wrote that I was optimistic he'd return because he has such a close relationship with multiple coaches, given he's from from Washington DC, the DMV, and Brennan Strawn and Autry in particular, that's their like recruiting, mecca, having both been coaches there, high school level and the grassroots level. So I wasn't surprised that I was glad to see Donnie returning, but I wasn't super surprised. But in terms of Starling, he's one of the top scoring guards in the ACC and even around the country. And, he's still not a great 3-point shooter. And I like him better at the 2 spot than the 1. I know he's a combo. I mean, he can play, point guard some, but I like him more at the 2. So to get back to your question, I think retaining those two guys over anyone else on the team that, was an underclassman, so to speak, that was vital. And, I think it was Alex Klein that said, if they went on the open market, they'd command a lot of dollars, blah, 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 which probably is true. And, I don't think Syracuse is in the top tier in terms of NIL, but I think they're relatively competitive. But I think either Klein or Autry, obviously, since it was the two of them in the thing, one of them said that NIL wasn't like the determining factor for anyone that's going to be on the roster for next year. I could be paraphrasing it. And
you are paraphrasing it.
I don't want to misquote,
right.
But he was in essence, at least what I gleaned from it is that he was saying, guys are getting paid, sure, but like it just wasn't the main reason or the only reason. Is that true or not? I have no idea. I'll take him for his word. But yeah, keeping those two. I mean, they had 12 scholarship players last year, and it's only 2 come back. I mean, it's crazy just the way the landscape is, but that's happening all over the country. But I mean, would I have been fine with other guys returning? Sure. I think, and it sounds like we're going to get into this maybe a little bit more, but I mean, I think the roster on paper looks better than last year for numerous reasons. I think they're going to be better on defense. But yeah, you can't overstate how important, from my perspective, it was to get JJ and Donnie both to come back. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it was super important, and they were really, if you go back to earlier in this offseason, they were really the only 2 players that Syracuse needed to come back.
Right.
Everyone else, I remember saying it on the podcast. We had conversations about it too here on the podcast as well. Like everyone else can kind of just go. If they go, I mean, I'm not going to bat an eye over it. I'm really not going to care all that much if they decide to leave. Like good for them, I guess. Go find somewhere else and good luck on the rest of your career. But
absolutely, yeah.
You can't have the same coaching staff and the same roster next season and expect different results. Right? Even if everyone is fully healthy for the entire year.
Right.
So the only 2 guys they really had to get back were JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman. They're not perfect players. Like I think that needs to be stated here. They're not perfect. JJ Starling still is not a good outside shooter. And I'll believe it when I see it if he actually starts hitting a 3-pointer at a relatively decent rate for an entire year. And Donnie Freeman, I think, needs to put on more muscle and also needs to get better on defense. Same with JJ Starling as regarding the defense. But as far as making the NCAA tournament, which is the elephant in the room, you needed to get back these 2 guys because had Syracuse lost them, they're not building a tournament roster in the portal. Like they're just not. They would have no chance of being able to replace that production in the transfer portal. So good on Syracuse for being able to keep the 2 guys that they absolutely had to keep in JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman. Now, Neil, coming up, we're going to talk about some of the transfer portal ads, specifically Naithan George, and how much better he makes Syracuse basketball. That's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. We're joined by Neil Adler here from Inside the Loud House. We are breaking down Syracuse basketball's State of the Union address, a 48-minute interview featuring head coach Adrian Autry and Alex Klein. In the first segment, we talked about keeping JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman, but that was only the foundation, Neil. That's only it. Those were only 2 players. Syracuse still needs to build out a roster, and on tomorrow's podcast, we'll break down how Syracuse basketball can fill up its remaining scholarship spots because they still have 3 more left, right? Let's get into the transfer portal additions for Syracuse basketball. Now, Adrian Autry and Alex Klein in that interview, they seem really excited for Georgia Tech point guard Naithan George. I mean, of course they're excited. I mean, they compared him to Tyler Ennis. Last season at Georgia Tech, he averaged 12 points. He led the ACC in assists per game. So with the addition of Naithan George, how much better does he make Syracuse compared to last year?
Good question. I think that, and Autry and Klein touched on it in the state of the program. He led the ACC in assists, correct? 6.5 per game. And if he also, I'm blanking, but 12, 13 points a game.
Yep, 12 points.
So, obviously not. I don't think Syracuse brought him in to be their leading scorer. I mean, I think he's a credible scorer, and he is a facilitator. And so, he's going to be, I guess, a junior, right? He's played 2 years at Georgia Tech. So he's played, at the power forward level. Not, and you and I have talked about this, not that guys that are mid-major and transfer to high major can't succeed, because they can. And some guys that are power forward and transfer to another power forward regret. You and I think, on the same page. We don't necessarily, it doesn't really matter one way or the other. But I think he's a great ad, and he's from Canada. And Klein and Autry kind of said that George, they brought up Tyler Ennis, who is from Canada too. Just someone that's like a steady presence, and again facilitates well for others, can score when the opportunities are there, or when needed, but not him being an 18-point per game score is not that's not his thing. So I personally it's tough, buddy. I don't want to sit here and bash people on the team from this past year, but what I'm saying,
it is okay.
Well, just because the season's also over, so it's it was a disaster season. What else can you say? No disrespect to Carlos or other guys that played point guard, and Starling played some there, and who else played point guard primarily? I'm totally drawing a blank. Cuff can play one, but anyway, I taking Starling out of the equation, again, no disrespect to this past year's team, but I think George is a significant upgrade. I was just looking, right before we came on. I mean, he's in the not the rankings are everything, but in the transfer rankings, national transfer rankings from 247 Sports right now, and I know it fluctuates, but he's 53rd overall and 13 at point guard. So, I mean, he's not, a 5-star, number one at his position, but I'll take a top 15 transfer portal point guard, wouldn't you? I think he's going to do well. I don't remember his stats from his freshman year, but again, this past year as a sophomore, he was good. And I don't think he's an amazing 3-point shooter, but credible. I mean, I still don't necessarily see Syracuse being an amazing 3-point shooting team. It depends. I mean, how much run is Kiyan Anthony going to get? Because he can shoot from deep. Luke Fennell can shoot from deep. Womack, that dude averaged 30 points per game. And I know that's the prep class, so we'll talk about that next. But yeah, to sum up, I think George is a significant upgrade. I think it was when that came across, I was like, oh, snap. I got excited. I think he's going to do well.
I think Naithan George is the one move that Syracuse has made in the transfer portal that truly moves the needle from last season. Because with all due respect, you're going from Jaquan Carlos as your starting point guard to Naithan George. And I think this is another aspect that's really important about him. He's a minutes eater.
Yeah.
This guy plays 35 minutes a night.
I was going to say 34, 35, whatever.
So,
yeah.
As long as he's healthy on the court.
Sure.
They don't really need a backup point guard, which we'll talk about later on in the podcast. They have one in Luke Fennell, a freshman, but they don't need to rely on a freshman backup point guard to play all that much, because Naithan George can play 35 minutes a night.
Right.
And he's going to get you 12 and 7 a night.
Yeah.
That's huge from your point guard, and he's going to help, in my opinion, everyone on the team get better. I think you hope that he improves on defense, because like a lot of players on Syracuse's roster right now, they do not profile as good defenders, which we'll talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses on the podcast tomorrow, but defense. Also, his shooting, it could get better. I believe he was 33.9% last year, but
yeah,
that's okay. You can see a path where if he stays even around that percentage, okay, so you have to respect his shot a little, but he could maybe increase it by a couple of percentage points, be 35, 36% next year, and be all ACC.
Yep.
Like he really could be that way. He was the one move that Syracuse made in the portal where I sat there and said, yep, this moves the needle. He moves Syracuse up a tier. If you thought Syracuse was already a tournament team before Naithan George, then you think now they're top 25. If you thought Syracuse was a bubble team before Naithan George, well, now you think they're firmly in the NCAA tournament with him. If you thought Syracuse was kind of close to the bubble with Naithan George, then now you think they're squarely on the bubble. You get the idea.
It definitely elevates them for sure.
He moves Syracuse up a tier with his presence alone because he's a really, really strong player. So that's Naithan George conversation for you. What else do you think about this transfer portal class?
I mean, I like Nate Kings. I mean, that dude, and again, sorry about my senior moments here, but 44% from three last year. Was it? Did I get that right?
Something like that? I'll interject here. 44.6% from 3-point line last year on over 4 attempts per game. What I really like about Nate Kings is this, right? 3 words. And people have heard me say this time and time again, but in case you are new to this podcast, maybe this is your first time tuning in, so you'll hear it for the first time. Guys, the one thing you need to know about Nate Kings is this. He can shoot.
Yes.
Continue, Neil. Continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, and he's got a really kind of touching backstory. He's been through a lot of stuff in his personal life, and so you root for him. But again, he can 44%, which is of course on brand. On good volume. It's not like he took 10 shots the whole year or something like that. And I think he might start at small. I could see him starting at small forward. I mean, I think he's listed at like 6'5", so I guess he's kind of a wing, small forward / shooting guard. Now it was interesting on what was that Friday when Tyler Betsy committed. That was that. I mean, and I know you'll agree with me here, and you'll want to weigh in. He obviously didn't have a lot of production this past year at Cincinnati, but I mean, since Syracuse recruited him, I wrote about him a handful of times when he was, in prep school. He was at St. Thomas More School, I believe, in Connecticut. He was a 2-time Connecticut Player of the Year by either Gatorade or Max Preps, one of those. The dude can score. Again, didn't show that this past year, but he also didn't get a ton of run. But he was a former, top 50 recruit. I don't remember what his rankings are in the transfer portal, but it doesn't really matter because he just didn't play a lot. But it's interesting. I mean, again, a guy that he had a Syracuse offer, and there was talk at some point that he was interested in visiting. Didn't happen, but he gives them additional depth. That I guess he's a small forward. Could he play power forward? I mean, he's 6'8". He's got good size. I don't know how much he's going to play, but that, since maybe it's recency bias because it just happened late last week, but that was an interesting one. We've talked about this before. The 2 centers to me are wild cards. Everyone loves to talk about how, they're only 6'9", they're not centers. To me, that's nonsense. Like there are centers out there that are 6'9", especially if they have, crazy long wingspans or, verticality in terms of, can jump. But they're unproven. William Kyle from UCLA didn't play much this past year and had some injury stuff. But the year before that, he at a mid-major, he was really good. And then Soare, I'm always butchering his name, from Georgia Tech. You
got it right.
Yeah, again, Autry and Klein made it pretty clear that those are the 2 centers, and that even though they're only 6'9", not 6'11" or 7 foot, that they're super hyper athletic, mobile, and rim protectors. And let's be honest, Syracuse didn't have a lot of rim protection on defense this past year. You would agree, right?
So I mean, they had a guy that was 6'11" that could block shots.
Yeah.
Impossible. You're 6'11". Jump.
Right. Well, yeah. As someone
get your hands up.
Yeah,
right. Shots inevitably.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a cool class. I mean, I again, this is all on paper, and you never know how they're going to mesh. But like on paper, it looks pretty intriguing to me. I think I'm missing one person. Who
Bryce
did I
Zephyr
miss?
from Montana State.
Oh yeah. You know, it gives them more guard depth. I mean, they have 3 scholarships. It'll be interesting to see if they use any of them. But I like the especially Kings and George. Again, the center spot. You know, I have questions about, or I'm not. We'll see how that shakes out. But I think I personally think they did better in the portal. Well, they have 6 guys, and I think last year they got 4 or 5. 4. So I think they've done better. Yeah, 4. So I think they've done better, and you can give Alex Klein props for that. You know, we'll see how the team actually plays, this fall. But I think they've done pretty well in the portal.
I think they've done okay. I
Yeah.
mean, you get Naithan George. That's a big one.
That's
I
a big
think Nate Kings is a slight upgrade on Chris Bell. I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think it's too much of an upgrade
That's
on him
right.
because I don't know how good he is going to be on defense.
Right.
And yeah, he could shoot 45% from 3. So I guess that's where you can really see the upgrade with Nate Kings. I also agree with you on the centers. My concern with the centers is not their height.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, it's not their height.
Right.
People saying we need someone who's 7 foot. You're wrong. That's not. You can build a team in so many different ways. We just saw a team go to the national championship with no one in their rotation above 6'9". It can be done. Okay, it can be done in college basketball, and some of the great centers in college basketball can also be 6'9". Okay,
Right.
it can happen. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about ability.
Right.
Like I'm worried about if they're actually good enough. Is
Right.
William Kyle actually good enough to be a starting center? That's a fair question. I don't know.
Sure.
Is Ibrahim Soare even good enough to be a backup? Because I don't know if you checked Evan Maya's ratings, but he was one of the worst offensive players in the conference last year.
Right.
You're just talking about offense. I understand we don't need him to score or anything like that, but still, like one of the least efficient offensive players in the country. And then I look at Bryce Zephyr, and I'm like, that's a roster filler. You fill the roster out with Bryce Zephyr. You have 15 spots. You want to use him as your 14th or 15th guy, fine. Hey, someone's got to play when you're up or down 20 points with a minute left. It might as well be Bryce Zephyr. You need guys to play in practice. You need fouls. So fine. That's why I didn't overreact to that move when it happened about, because like, as long as they don't really play him, I don't really care about the move. Right. And then Tyler Betsy is very interesting because you know that there's upside there. Because he's a highly ranked recruit, but the production last season was not there. You're looking at someone who was profiled to be a good shooter out of high school, and he shot 27% from the 3-point line in conference play last year. That's it. So I almost look at that and I say, so he was a shooter that can't shoot?
I mean,
that's kind of a problem.
That's fair.
So there's upside. I get it.
Yeah.
And there's so much upside to the point where if he realizes his potential, I mean, he could be the starting small forward by like game 5. And we can have Nate Kings as a weapon off the bench. But it could also work the other way where he's just kind of there and he never lives up to top 50 potential.
Yeah, I agree. And those are all fair things to say. And I think overall he shot like 32% from 30, but yeah, it was lower in conference play. And yeah, the production wasn't there this past year. Again, he didn't play a ton of minutes. Let me look up how many minutes he played per game. 11 minutes per game. But I agree with you. If he realizes his, potential from, when he was in prep school, he's an athletic dude. He could definitely, I agree with you. I think Kings is going to start at small forward. I don't think Betsy would, at least at the onset of the season. But we'll see. I still think they did better in the portal this year than they did last year. I
think Naithan George alone makes it better than last year. You get one guy could define a class. So I think that alone makes it better. So Neil, I think that just about does it for talking about the transfer portal additions for Syracuse basketball. And don't forget, on tomorrow's podcast, we'll talk about how Syracuse can fill up its 3 remaining scholarships in the transfer portal or overseas or JUCO, or maybe they get a freshman or 2 in the high school recruiting class if there's still some players out there as well. But coming up here on this podcast, we will talk about the freshman class that Syracuse is bringing in, featuring Kiyan Anthony and Sadiq White. So stick with us here on Locked On Syracuse. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And speaking of smart, you must be really smart if you thought the Indiana Pacers were going to take a 2-0 series lead on the best team in the Eastern Conference during the regular season on the road. Can you believe it? Are the Indiana Pacers actually going to pull off this upset? Well, if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up and perhaps put your money where your mouth is. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Of course, we are joined by Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House. Earlier on in the podcast, we talked about the importance of keeping JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman for this upcoming season, some of the transfer portal additions, and how much better Naithan George makes Syracuse basketball by himself alone. He just increases Syracuse by a tier. But let's now talk about the freshman class, because Adrian Autry and Alex Klein in that State of the Union address, they were obviously very excited about it. Adrian Autry talked about how really the significance of getting Sadiq White, because, this is a North Carolina guy and you're going into their turf and you're somehow able to land a guy who is top 30 in the country here. And you get Kiyan Anthony, Luke Fennell, Aaron Womack round out the class as well. So, Neil, my question for you is this. How much of an impact do you think the freshmen will have right away?
Great question. And so I was just looking it up since we were talking about it, and it looks like right now in the 247 Sports Composite, the high school class is number 9 nationwide. So, that's nice. I think 247 Sports actually just came out with their final 2025 rankings today. I haven't really poked into it too much, but to answer your question, I don't know that I don't see any of the 4 freshmen playing a ton of minutes, but it could change depending on if the upperclassmen aren't cutting the mustard, so to speak, or if someone gets injured. Knock on wood, I don't want that to happen. But like you looked at Elijah Moore this past year, he got more run for several reasons, but obviously Starling went out for 7 games. So anyway, I'm not saying they're not going to play at all. And obviously Sadiq White is, a top 25, top 30 guy. Ultra athletic, plays way above the rim. Great rebounder, defensive guy. I think obviously still has, he wants, kind of even with Donnie, he'll want to add strength, to his physique. And he's still, I'm saying this and not trying to be disrespectful, I think he's a work in progress on offense, at least in terms of outside, the paint. But yeah, getting him was a big recruiting win. He's from Charlotte. He played this past year at IMG, where Donnie played his senior year as well. And if memory serves correct, I think Brendan Strawn was his lead recruiter, and Sadiq talked in interviews about how Brendan was at all his games and the coaches were always they recruited him really hard. So that was a good recruiting win. Kiyan, he's obviously Melo's son, but he's trying to make his own mark, and I think his top 30 to 35 ranking is deserved. It's not based on the fact that his dad's Carmelo Anthony. He had a good senior year at Long Island Lutheran, and he just lit it up at the Jordan Brand Classic, one of those all-star showcases. But again, I just don't know. I don't see him playing a ton just because they do have multiple guards on the roster, and if you presume that Nate George is the starting point guard and Starling's the 2 guard. He could 10, 15 minutes. So Luke Fennell is a 4-star, top 125-ish, plays overseas in Australia, plays against pros. I think he's going to be a good player. And Womack averaged 30 points per game and had 2 50-point games, and playing in the Milwaukee area. And I'm not saying he played against the toughest competition nationwide, but it's a nice looking class on paper. But to reiterate, I don't see any of them necessarily playing a ton of minutes, but I think they'll all play. I mean, and Autry, he likes to use a larger rotation. I mean, he might pare it down as the season wears on, but I could see, them getting, I don't think any of them are going to start. I don't know. I'm trying to think like who out of those four would play the most minutes.
Probably Sadiq.
I'm thinking
Because-
Sadiq, but obviously they do have Donnie, and they both, are play the four. Maybe they could play the threesome. I don't know. But yeah, maybe Sadiq. I mean, I think Kiyan will play some, especially if he's shooting well from outside, kind of like we talk about with Elijah Moore. If you bring him in as a shooter and he shoots well, maybe get some run. But I don't know. What do you think? I don't see any of them making a huge, again, unless, knock on wood, there's injuries or just, some other stuff going on.
I'll start off by saying that right now, presently looking at the roster, I think the freshmen are going to have to make a substantial impact in order for this team to make the NCAA tournament.
Fair.
Well, that's where I'll start off there.
Yeah.
I think Sadiq White is probably going to be the freshman that plays the most, because you look at the guard depth and you look at Kiyan Anthony.
Yeah.
The way you can carve out minutes for him is maybe he gets some looks at the three as well.
Agreed.
But I mean, right now he's behind JJ Starling, and your point guard's Naithan George, who's going to play 35 minutes a night. So
yeah,
I don't know exactly where Kiyan Anthony fits in, at least at the start of the year.
Right.
I mean, if he starts playing well off the bench, I mean, all bets are off. But with Sadiq White, you could see a more path to playing time, because how good are William Kyle and Ibrahim Soare? How good are they?
So you're thinking maybe Sadiq and or Donnie could play the five some?
I think they can play at the same time, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I can kind of see a path for Sadiq White getting more minutes, because if Sadiq is playing crazy off the bench and he's doing well to start, and then you have William Kyle there who might struggle. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's great, maybe he's not. Who knows? Yeah. But if he's not playing well to start the year, well, your way to get Sadiq White more playing time is, well, you might need to slide Donnie to the five, which I know people aren't in love with, but that's the way to really play Sadiq White.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think Autry? I think Autry said that he grew another inch, so he's like 6'10", 6'11".
Oh yeah, he did grow another inch.
Yeah, if he's got
the size, he could do it.
He needs more, more bulk, a little bit more bulk. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, hey, listen, those other guys, Soare and Kyle are both 6'9", so 6'11". No, I don't remember any of their weights off the top of my head, but I assume that Kyle and Soare are probably a little bit more bulky. Maybe not.
A little bit more beef.
A little more beef. I mean, not like, Eddie Lampion beef. I love you, Eddie. Yeah, no, I agree with you about Sadiq. I think he, out of the four freshmen, he's, and again, and we'll talk about this, on the next one, but their defense still, I think, is going to be a question mark. And Sadiq is a really good defender. Now, he was a really good defender at the prep level, so obviously we'll see how that translates over. But I could see him getting more minutes also, just because his defensive abilities and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I agree with you.
Absolutely. One final thing here before we wrap this up. So, I do want to check Adrian Autry on one thing. Okay, I want to check him on one thing, because I got to be fair. He mentioned in that State of the Union that Luke Fennell, if he was rated, would be a top 25 recruit in the country.
Right.
He just straight up said something along those lines. Maybe I'm paraphrasing a little. Don't want to misquote him, but that's essentially what he said. He's a top 25 guy in the country. Yeah, so you can actually fact check that. Luke Fennell is rated on all the recruiting services out there. And I'm not going to say he's a bad recruiter or anything like that, but he's not top 25.
Right.
He is a 4-star recruit on ESPN and I believe on 24/7 Sports, but he's not a top 100. And some of the other recruiting services have him as a 3-star.
Right.
Having said that, do you think that we're sleeping on him?
I don't know if sleeping is how I'd characterize it. I just think he plays in Australia. So it's just, I think there's a lack of awareness, not by the Syracuse coaching staff, by fans and media or whatever, because again, he plays overseas. And I think I've seen articles about some of his games. He's had some good games, and I think I'm not saying he's going to play a lot this year, but I think he could carve out a nice career. And, he can play. He's listed as a point guard some places and as a combo elsewhere. So it sounds like he could play the one or the two. I don't know if we're sleeping on him. I think he could be good. He plays in Australia, but you're right. He's a 4-star in a couple places, top 125, but others he's like, 3 stars and top 300. But how these rankings go, man. I mean, we pay attention to them. I use them for stories, but I also say a lot of times, like, take them with the proverbial grain of salt, because rankings don't always pan out. A lower ranked guy could end up being a stud, and vice versa. So I think he's going to be a good player. I agree with you. I don't know how much he's going to play this year.
You're right about the rankings. They are not perfect. Having said that, I just have a hard time believing that he would be a top 25 player in the country.
That's a big jump.
Because they're not so – I just – like the scouts I feel like would know. Like, oh, he's in Australia, so we're just going to slap on this tag with him. Like,
right.
I just don't see how all of a sudden, if he was in America, they would reevaluate him and say he's really top 25. Like, they could be wrong, but I feel like the players. If you're a scout, the guys who are definitively in the top 25 or can have an argument for it. And then you also know the players that have no case. If you want to sit here and try to argue with me that maybe Luke Fennell could be a top 100, yeah, I mean, like, he's not that far off. But to sit here and say top 25 and to sell the fan base on that, I mean, when you're selling top 25 to people, you're selling someone that is going to be a high impact player potentially right away. And I'm not getting my expectations too high for Luke Fennell. And also, they got Naithan George. Like, they got him to play 35 minutes a night anyway. So I don't think they need to rely on him too much to be a top 25 talent in order to make the NCAA tournament. I think it's really going to come down to how good Kiyan Anthony and Sadiq White are right away. If those guys are really good right away, you can kind of start to see the paths for Syracuse to make it. If they're not, if it looks like they need more seasoning, they need more time, well, I think it's going to be an uphill battle for Syracuse to make the tournament. But folks, we got another podcast coming up tomorrow with myself and Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House. Syracuse basketball still has 3 open scholarships remaining, and we'll talk about how Syracuse can fill them on the next podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of the day. And for your second listen, be sure to check out the Locked On Portal podcast. Brian Smith, recruiting expert, he's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. And you can be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. You can find the Portal podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I will see you all again soon.